Hi, Mitja. Welcome to Track B and HR Week 2022. I'm not gonna take any much of your time. I'm not gonna introduce you. I'm gonna let that do you do that. But my idea is to actually introduce our audience to your topic. So we're gonna be continuing the discussion on HR trends, but this time we're talking about everything talent trends. So we're gonna be talking about employees and what they need, what they value, and what's happening on the job market in the next couple of years. So Mitya, the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Masha. So, okay, let's start with the global talent trends. So on the presentation today, what I wanted to show you, so LinkedIn did the global research, the global survey, asking the LinkedIn members, companies, what so they did the surveys and then they gathered the feedback. And what we will be checking today are some of the global talent trends, what we see. And I thought that's a really good segue into that global talent trends is that we check what we actually spoke last year, because last year on the HR week we discussed about the future of the recruitment, and those were the six predictions which we saw last year. And then we can obviously see during the presentation today which of those predictions came to the reality, some of them more, some of them less, especially because in the last couple of years we see that the world is changing really rapidly. So let's see what we discussed last time. So one of the first predictions what we discussed was about the hiring, or the recruiting will hire less and they will build and borrow more. So that's really built. So it's based on the internal mobility, meaning that the HR teams will partner with LinkedIn, with learning and the development teams, building the catalog of employee skills, and looking at the internal job opportunities, see where some of the qualification gaps and how to equip current employees with the skills needed for the new internal moves. So that was one of the first prediction. Second was that the recruiting will help to keep the businesses accountable for diversity, which is really related to the remote work. So with the opportunities hiring the remote talent, or offering the options of the remote work, our talent pools are much wider, since we can access wider audience with that. Third one was about the virtual recruiting is here to stay. So obviously the HR teams were doing the some part of the virtual recruiting even before the pandemic times, and then obviously during the pandemic time the whole circle had to be done remotely. And at that time we said that the virtual recruiting will stay here. Indeed, we still see that there is still virtual recruiting happening, but we see the shift that there is more and more also in-person hiring or the recruitment. Obviously, we need to find a way how to optimize the candidate experience, and obviously the assessment advantages which we have when we are doing the recruitment in person. One of the things what we can always leverage is that virtual recruitment, one of the benefit is having is the speed and efficiency. And this one more thing to mention here is that the virtual recruitment, obviously it would really depends as well on the seniority of the role, where probably for more senior managerial positions would be important to have more face-to-face interactions and the on-site visits. So the fourth one was that the recruiters will lead the transition to remote work. Obviously the HR teams were very aligned with the management of the company when they were doing the workforce planning, capacity planning, the company culture. So that's why all the remote work possibilities really depends as well on the feedback which is coming from the HR teams. Then the fifth one was about the employer brand that is based on empathy and actions. What we saw that, let's say, instead of companies just showing the company products, benefit, and office amenities, the brand is a bit moving into the way how they are supporting the employees, how they are supporting the customers in the time of the crisis. And then the sixth prediction was about the recruiters that will build new skills aligned with the businesses. Okay, so now let's see how those predictions, what we see today. All the reports which I will show you today, they are based on the LinkedIn economic graph. That's something what I suggest you as well to check, so you can select your location or the industry where you work, and you would be able to see some of the trends which might bring a value to you. So economic graph is based on the 6 main LinkedIn pillars, which on one side would be the LinkedIn members, then it would be the LinkedIn so companies, jobs, skills, and then we have schools and knowledge. And then the 6th pillar is the data which we see. So based on all those 6 main pillars, there are certain predictions what we can do. So if we go to the first prediction on the trends in hiring, what we see here is that hiring is leveling off after historic heights. As you can see in this graph, in most of the countries globally, there is less hiring than it was year before. We see big drops in India, Brazil, Mexico, Australia. We see drops as well in the European countries like Italy, France, Germany, Spain. But what we need to understand on this graph is that even though that it's less hiring, we are comparing ourselves to the last year when the hiring was on the highest peak in the last 50 years. So yeah, as mentioned here, it's leveling from the historic highs. Here we have a saying from LinkedIn chief economist Karen Kimbrough. She's saying that we, for the future, we need to understand what skills your employees are currently having and what skills the company needs. And then having this knowledge will also help to go through any of the economic uncertainty and any of the labor market volatility. Okay, if you go to the next trend, which was trend based on the workforce confidence. So we analyzed, we did the survey with the LinkedIn members, trying to understand how confident are they in either a certain role or making any of the changes of the employer. So moving from employer A to employer B. And what we see here is that there is less confidence. So in a lot of the countries globally, there is less confidence with the employees making any drastic changes in terms of the employer or the career. What would be one of the main factors here would most probably be the news which we are reading about the inflation being high, and then the second one as well, the interest rates growing every couple of months. So people are losing the confidence, and then that's something what can impact their decision as well when moving from one employer to another. Another saying from LinkedIn principal economists: so we cannot eliminate uncertainty, but we can do our best to mitigate it for the employees. So now let's go to see what are the trends in what candidates value. So it's a super interesting report. And I remember we are doing this report for the last probably 10 years already. So each year we analyze when candidates are thinking of doing their next step in the career in terms of changing the employer, what would be the most important factor for them to do that certain change. And let's say what we see here is that the compensation is on the first place, which is probably quite related to the confidence which we saw on the previous slide, which is going down. So that's why compensation would be highly important for the candidates when moving the company. And then on the second and third place, we have the balance and flexibility. So those are relatively new benefits if we would compare it to the years before. Kind of during the pandemic time, the balance and flexibility were on the first and second place. So employees or LinkedIn members were always looking, that was one of their highest priority to have the balance in terms of work-life balance and the flexibility in terms of the work arrangement. Now we see that on the second and third place, compensation on the first one. And then we see on the place 4, so it's the upskilling. Especially if we look at the Generation Z, we would see that upskilling is something very important for them. So they would be looking at options where they can learn something new, when they can get certain skills. So as I mentioned, Generation Z would have the upskilling on the highest level. So they would be looking at the companies or at the roles where they can grow their career and learn something new. Then obviously here are some more of the priorities we see here: advancement, impact, job security, happiness, and so on. I remember in the years ago as well, let's say job work location was very important, because in certain places, cities, the commute could be very long. So that was also important for the employees. So here there is just a short summary. I was on a presentation last week with Peter Brock, who is the director of LinkedIn learning and development team in the financial company called Finastra. And what was very interesting, what he was mentioning, so that he said that the role of the learning and development team has really changed in the last couple of years. So he mentioned before that the way how it looked like is that before, always the teams came to their team and they mentioned, we would like to get certain skills or certain knowledge, and then the L&D teams, they found a provider of this knowledge or skills, and then they delivered the session to the certain team. And what has happened in the last couple of years, that changed. So it means that now the way how their team is doing is that they are always looking what are top 3 to 5 strategic priorities for the whole company, and then they are looking what are the underpinning capabilities for the people to reach those priorities, and then on the third place are what are the skills needed to hit that corporate strategy. So it's just the reversed way. So as it's written here, they were also looking what's the best for them, either building the skills, buying the skills, or borrowing the skills. So buying means hiring new people, borrowing means so hiring somebody on a short-term contract, or building the skills, and they saw that building the skills is the way to go forward. Okay, and now we came to the very interesting trend, what we see here. So let's say when we looked in February 2022, when we looked at all the remote jobs which were posted on the LinkedIn network, we saw that around 20% of jobs offer the option of the remote work, and 50% of all the applicants applied on those remote jobs. If we look at today, so we would be able to see that the number of applicants which are applying for the remote jobs is increasing. So there is more and more interest for the remote jobs. But then on the other hand, what we see that there is less jobs being posted which are offering the remote location as the option here. So on one hand, we have more and more interest from the applicant side for the remote job, and then we see that there is less and less job posting which would offer the option of the remote work. Also, I did some research. I think it was last week. I was checking the remote jobs in Serbia. So I saw that in the total there is around 4,000 jobs offering at the moment on the LinkedIn network, and 1.3 thousand of them had the option of working remotely. So what we see here, that this trend is global. So we see as well in many other locations that, as I mentioned before, the applicants for the remote jobs are increasing. So there is more and more interest. But in terms of the jobs posted which offer the remote location, it's decreasing. One saying from LinkedIn VP of Global Talent Acquisition. So the candidates are looking for companies which value their whole self and provide support for achieving the work-life balance. And now let's go to the trends in the employee growth and the transformation. So again, a very interesting trend to see. What we see here is the topic which we mentioned before about the future of the recruitment and the internal mobility, how the HR and the recruiter team connected with the L&D teams. So what we see that when we analyze how long the members are staying with a certain employer, what we would see that the more changes the employee is doing internally in that company, the longer would stay in that company. So as we can see here, let's say after the year 1, when a person did certain internal move, either it can be promotion or the lateral change, there is 87% chance that that person would stay longer in a company compared to 75 if there are no changes. Then we see even bigger increase at the year 2. So we see the light green color are for the people who are doing the internal changes, and the dark green are the people without the internal changes. So we see that more people are changing internally, less likely they would they would leave the company. Obviously, all this retention really depends on as well the industry and the location. What we see here, some of the highlights for, we would see that financial services ranks number 1 in the retention, and we would see that retail would have a high. Retail would have is struggling with the employee retention with or without the internal mobility. Also, we see for other industries, so we mentioned financial services would have a high employee retention, and then utilities, wholesale, constructions, and then the industries with less retention would be retail and accommodation. And also, so that was based on the industries, and regionally, what we would see that the internal mobility has impact to be seen in Australia, UK, and Singapore. India and Japan would have high employee retention, but does not depend on the internal mobility. And for the France employee, the retention is low. Okay, so just as businesses need new skills, also employees need to discover new career possibilities. And just to summarize what we saw today, so we were talking about the hiring rates are dropping. What we saw that there is also drop in the confidence of improving the financial situation. We saw that candidates want compensation, flexibility, and advancement in their careers. We saw that the remote jobs are dropping, but there is more and more applicants for those remote jobs. And we discuss about retention and the internal mobility. So 64% of employees who move internally would also stay longer than 3 years in the company. What that means for talent and learning development professionals, we spoke that we need to make the most from the quiet times and develop the employee skills and the brand. Exploring the benefits for the employees like flexibility or training opportunities. We discuss about the remote or hybrid roles can have a wider talent pools and increase the applications. And we also discuss about the internal mobility as a key for retention. So that's in terms of this of the presentation. What I just wanted to show you is shortly the talent block by the LinkedIn chief economist. So what we can see here, so we are seeing at the moment we see the lowest record low unemployment, high inflation, rising rates, and slowing growth. Some graph about the real GDP forecast for the future. And what we can do about this. So Karen is mentioning that here what we can do, so how to navigate this uncertainty is that we need to stay adaptive, get informed, and be decisive. So maybe one more to add from my side is that what we need to do is that we need to control the controllable. So something what is based on your role or your impact, what you can do, try to control what you can control in your role. And then in terms of the trends, we can still see that the market, the job market is relatively tight in terms of, we see that there is at least one applicant for one job opening. And in terms of the skills, so not just looking at the education pedigree, but also looking at the skills and how quickly the person can gain those skills. This way, our talent pools or the pipeline can significantly increase using the skill first hiring.
Thank you very much, Mitja, for sharing your insights.
I hope you enjoy the presentation, and yeah, let me stop the sharing.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much for your support and participating in HR Week this year as well. So thank you. Have a nice rest of the day, and please join us at other sessions.
Perfect. Thank you for the invitation, and I wish you all the best.